All right. Can you hear me now? There's always one. Well, it's 6 o'clock, and so out of respect of all the Lions fans, we'll keep things moving so we can hopefully try to get home for the fourth quarter. But thank you. I might be watching the score right here. For now. Actually, I need to pull up the live stream. But yeah, I want to just thank you all for taking the time to come out tonight and to join us for this. I know it's been a while since we've done this, but part of it is we were just waiting. We wanted to make sure we were at a point where we actually had enough information to make this worthwhile. And I think we're at that point tonight. So we have a few things that we're going to share with you. But first, I'm going to invite Mike to open us in prayer.
Test. Am I there? Yep. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the opportunity to get together this evening as your church, discuss your business, Father. And we just thank you for everything you've been doing in our band. So, Father, we just ask that you would guide our conversation this evening, that you just give us wisdom and discernment, and that you would bless us. I'm holding on to faith.
Thank you, Mike. So what I want to do to start this time, this is actually pretty much the same thing that we did to open our first elders meeting of the year. Before we jump into business, because it is very easy in the church world to just jump right into business, into all the details and all that. But one of the things I've been so impressed by since coming here to Banner is just seeing the heart of prayer that this church has. I think Diana Brown is a big part of that, but I have a feeling that part of that was also here before her as well. So what I want to do before we jump into all the nitty-gritty is just to take a moment. As we are in November, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. I want to take a moment to pray together as a congregation and just to give thanks for the way that we've seen God working. So what I want to do first is I've got this question you'll see on the screen here. And this is an opportunity for you to get involved. Maybe we'll see on the screen. There we go. Where have you seen God working at Banner over the past year? So what we're going to do is just take a few minutes, and if you want to share something, feel free just to shout it out. But where have you seen God working over the past year? And then we're going to take some time just to pray together and thank God for that. And then we'll jump into the business. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to this question. Where have you seen God working in Banner over the past year?
your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful.
Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I've got the document. No, because I was just having that same thought. Because I think was it 7 back in February? So, well, there was, because that day we had baptisms, new members, and child dedications as well. But I think it was 6 or 7 that day. Do you remember, Paul? You were one of them. Yeah. And then, so 3 more today. So we're 9, 10, something like that for the year, which is awesome. Yeah, Paul, that was my fault. Sorry, Paul. That was my first time doing baptism, so I was nervous, and I've never done baptisms in a hot tub. That was a good moment. Yeah, Lord.
Yes, all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, surrendered now, I give you
Well, let's do this. Let's just take some time, and I want to read a passage for you really quick here. Pull it up. And you'll see it on the screen, Psalm 107. As I was thinking through this moment tonight, I came across this passage recently, and I thought it fit very well. It's Psalm 107, verses 4 through 9. And I think it fits sort of the journey of Banner Church over the last little bit. Some wandered in the desolate wilderness, finding no way to a city where they could live. They were hungry and thirsty, their spirits failed within them. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble. He rescued them from their distress. He led them by the right path to go to a city where they could live. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his faithful love and his wondrous works for all humanity. For he has satisfied the thirsty and filled the hungry with good things. Everything I've seen, even from my time here, I know that this church has gone through some difficult seasons, but I love the beauty in that of seeing the people in their distress and making the same decision that has already been said here tonight, of that decision to prayer, to cry out to God, and seeing how faithful God is to answer. And so in that passage, we see the response then of the people, of us, is to give thanks. So what I want to do is just take the next couple minutes, we're going to open it up, and I want to give you an opportunity to pray together. So if you feel led to pray, just pray out loud. And the rule that I would always use with teens, and I think it works with adults as well, is after about 10 seconds of awkward silence, I'll wrap us up. So if you feel led to pray tonight, I'm just going to open it up. But let's pray together, and then I'll close this up in a minute.
Yes, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? Oh, how far I'd scale
Dear Father, God, we just thank you for your faithfulness.
if you grace the
Father, time and time again in life, we see the reality that we are going to have troubles in this world. But Father, we thank you that we can take heart, because as we see promise in Scripture, you have overcome the world. Father, you are a God that doesn't abandon us in our struggles, but you are a God that walks alongside us. So Father, we thank you for walking with us, not leaving us alone in our times of struggle. God, I thank you for the way that time and time again you have brought answers to prayer, that time and time again we've seen your goodness, time and time again we've seen individuals being drawn to you and making that decision to give their life to you, to get baptized, to dedicate their children. Father, you have just been so good even just in this last year. So God, we pray that you would continue to do that as we look to the future. God, as we try to figure out where you are taking us as a church, I pray that you would continue to guide us. May we not get ahead of ourselves, but may we still be a church that waits. May we still be a church that waits for your leading and that stays in step with your spirit. So God, tonight as we have this opportunity, both to reflect on where you have taken us, but also to look ahead, would you just guide these conversations, and may we just continue to maintain a heart of gratitude. In your name, amen. All right, well, thank you. So I have a feeling that probably the big topic where there's the most questions is finances. So we're just going to jump right into it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share some information with you, both of looking back at this last year and then looking ahead. And then we will have a time for some question and answer after that. But let's just kind of dive right in. So look at this first slide here. So this is kind of the high view. If you look at this last fiscal year. So for the last fiscal year, our net income, so at the end of the day, if you look at kind of where we're at in the bank, it was a loss of $23,000, $23,383.51. But even with that in the bank right now, at the end of the fiscal year, we were sitting at about $164,174.48. Looking at the weekly giving, the actual averaged out to somewhere around $5,400 there. You see, based on just looking at that deficit, it would have put us at we needed about $5,863.68. A difference of basically $450 a week, which honestly, in the grand scheme of things, as a pastor to look at that, that's not that far off. And if you look at this next slide here, I think this is the right one. Oh, there's looking at just kind of the overview of the bank, what's in the bank. And so you see it's been fairly stable. There was a loss, but not too bad. But now I think it's the next slide. This is the one that gives me hope. So whenever we look at that loss of $23,383, whenever all of a sudden you start considering some of the expenses that we had in that fiscal year. So I mean, there was roughly $15,000 that went into the parsonage upgrades, which could have been, what was the number? It could have easily been 50,000, but because this church rallied together, we're about 15,000. Yes, from Alicia and I, thank you. But then you also consider that in that fiscal year, you also added a senior pastor salary, and I'm sorry, I'm expensive, you know? You can ask my wife, I have expensive taste. But then also adding in a support pastor. And then another thing I didn't even think to add, but talking with Tim today, there was also some pretty significant tech upgrades that we did in this last fiscal year that totaled out to about $7,500. So you look at some of those expenses that aren't necessarily always going to be repeated expenses, and really quickly that income difference is made up. And it was interesting for us as elders when we looked at the end of year numbers. I believe it was back in January-ish, whenever we sat down and looked at the finances at that point, and we were kind of shared the financial outlook for the year, or the forecast. At that time, we were projecting about a $60,000 to $70,000 loss for the year. And so when we got to the end of the year and we saw $23,000, I don't think I've seen 5 men more excited to lose $23,000. And I share that with you just to say thank you. I know it can look a little bleak to see that we lost that much in a year, but at the same time, going into this fiscal year, knowing that a senior pastor salary was going to get added back into the mix, we knew that this was going to be a deficit year with the expectation that we're investing for the future, with the expectation that we're not going to keep taking those hits year after year, but that we are going to grow into the future. And so I really do believe as we look at this next year, there's still some things that we have to take care of. There's some upcoming expenses that we're going to share about in just a second. But what I want us to keep in mind is that God has been faithful and things are good. I mean, we have $160-some thousand in the bank. We have some cushion to work with. We don't want to tap into that cushion too much, but it gives us that time to right some things, to fix some things, to tighten up in certain areas so that we can move into the future in a more positive direction. And I believe that's where we are heading. And I believe the next slide is kind of looking ahead here now. This is a very high-level view, but this is now looking at the current fiscal year, so September 23 through August 24th. This is the high-level budget. You can see some of the line items, and it's also broken down in the handouts that you received. But we're looking at a budget of roughly $344,000 this year. That's our expected expenditures. And between that and also some expenses that I'm going to let Bill share on here in just a second, it is looking right now at the beginning of the fiscal year, a projected loss of about $30,000. But again, after hearing that we were projected in January at $60,000, $70,000 loss, and we turned that into $24,000, I look at 30, and I'm pretty confident that we can make that turn. There's some things that we can do, and honestly, I believe that people are going to be faithful. I'm not too worried about that, so I think that is something that we can overcome. But I want to hand it off to Bill to cover some upcoming expenses.
First of all, I just want to say, Jeff, for
My soul will rest, my confidence in you alone. Hope has in me. His name is Jesus, my Savior's cross has set the sinner free. Hope has a name. His name is Jesus. Oh, Christ be praised. I have victory. There is a light, salvation's flame. Christ undefeated, trembled the grave. Come on! See now the cross be lifted high. The light has come, the light is won. Behold the Christ. Sing it! Hope has a name. His name is Jesus, my Savior's cross
we're to address the whole thing. So I say that just so we know as a body and so we know as a church what we need to be planning for. These are going to be some bigger expenses. Now, the
When
one
darkness
out of
tries
all
to
of it,
roll
the
over
good news
my
is,
bones,
feel like this is
when
you have
sorrow
support
comes
this
to
property.
steal the joy I own,
I mean, they said this church has been
when brokenness and pain is all I know,
overall
oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken.
some of them are good.
My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love.
Always wondered if we have a lot to thank for. One of the things that we
He no longer has a place to hide.
Getzers and air exchange.
I am not captive to the light. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. Oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, I'm standing. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, well, when I stand in your love, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. I'm standing in your love. Standing in your love. Standing on the rock. I'm standing in your love.
This is one that we're going to look at addressing sooner than later. And then we'll really start preparing ourselves as a church to, okay, how do we replace one of these each year? Another thing, and that Mark recommended, is these guys are good. It's a good company, but we can look around a little bit. Let's get a couple estimates. And as an elder group, that is something we always do. We always try to, be discerning about maybe good stewardship of how we're using the church's money. So we will look into that a little further moving forward. But that's kind of the here and now information that is coming in just over the past couple of months. We want to be able to share that with you. So that's pretty much, I think, it for right now. What's that?
You are here.
The it thing. Tim asked if that's
Yeah.
the crack pan, but I'm not. I don't think does it have a crack pan? Right.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other side of it, it could just be a new water feature, like one of those nice water walls. Yeah. Yeah, an aquarium, thinking on the bright side. I mean, I've heard this church loves its water and floods. So,
Is there anything that I missed that you might want to add to what I just said? That's a lot of information.
That's it.
was it 97? I feel like I've heard.
So that's fine.
So obviously there's some upcoming expenses and some things we have to fix. And so that brings up the question of what are we doing to try to get ahead of that, or what are we doing to try to fix that? So a few steps that we're taking. First of all, one thing, a few months ago, I had a conversation with Don Vanderlaan, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. He was the church treasurer for many, many, many years. A few months ago, I approached him and just asked if he'd be willing to temporarily step back into a role, not overseeing everything, but simply almost really acting as the architect of the finance team. As some of you may know, we haven't really had a fully fleshed out finance team in 2-3 years. It's been a little while. So Tim has 2 years. So Tim has single-handedly been doing the job of about 4 or 5 people, which is incredible that you're still functioning. And so to ask him to keep doing what he's doing with that while also trying to rebuild a finance team, it just wasn't feasible. So I had a conversation with Don Vanderlaan and asked, could you come in just for a year, 2 years max, and be the architect and rebuild that team so we can start taking things off of Tim's plate and free him up? And he was gracious enough to agree to do that. So he's been functioning in that role for a few months. It's not going to be an overnight fix. It's not going to be an overnight process to where we just snap our fingers and we have a fully functioning finance team again. There's a lot of intricacies. There's learning the different programs that we're using and all of that kind of stuff. But I know they've been making progress on that. The approach, if I help me to make sure I say this correctly, Tim, but the approach that we've been taking as of right now is they're really focusing on almost building more of a governance team for the finances, so the higher level, the ones overseeing everything. And then we'll start fleshing out more of the day-to-day roles. And already I know there's been a few individuals that have agreed to step on and help in that capacity. So progress is being made. It's going to take a little bit of time, but know that we are working on getting the finance team back up and running because we know that is very, very important. Another step that we're taking is, I'm sure some of you, it almost became a joke between Linda and I feel like in the office of each week. It's like, okay, so how do we word the finance part of the bulletin so that people don't get tired of it. And I don't even remember what it is right now, but it's something about it's coming or whatever. But truly now, it is coming soon. We are almost at the point where at a minimum we'll at least have the weekly giving back in there. The holdup in that is, again, just as we have one individual doing the role of 5 people, trying to keep the weekly updates, it's tricky. But so we're bringing some other people in to help smooth that out to get the right information that we need. And so that should be, my goal would be by the first week of January, that's going to be back in the bulletin. So you'll know what's coming. Another question that I've been asked about that is related to finance is what happened with the grand piano. And I'll be totally transparent with that. We did end up selling the grand piano about a month and a half ago for $5,000, which was a really good deal. We contacted a grand piano dealer here in Grand Rapids, and just to see, like, hey, what would you give us for it? And their highest, after going back and forth, I let Kennedy be the negotiator, and she hated it, but she did great. Their highest offer was like $2,200, and the stand that it was on alone was worth like $800. So that we were not willing to do that. So we put it out there just to see if we get any hits, and it did finally sell for $5,000. The goal for that, I put it up to Kennedy, and I had her give me a list. But that's going to go back into the worship ministry because there's just a lot of different tech upgrades that need to be made. So that money is going to be going back in to allow Kennedy to make some of those upgrades without tapping into the budget. So this is one way that we're getting kind of scrappy. It's something that when I was at Callwood Church as the worship leader, I spent the 4 years that I was there digging through closets. There was so much tech equipment that was tucked back in the back that was no longer used that nobody just dealt with. So as they would replace things, they throw it in a closet. I was able to fund probably half of my worship budget just by going through and selling stuff off, just being scrappy. And that's something I've been encouraging Kennedy to do. And so when we looked at the grand piano and realized that it just was not being utilized, plus the cost of upkeep, and when you have a room like this, grand pianos aren't meant to be in a room that's not humidified and where the temperature is fluctuating. So we were having to spend a ton of money just to keep it updated. And so it got to a point where we realized we're going to get more value from selling it off and reinvesting than in maintaining this thing that's getting used once every 2 months. So that's what's going on with that. And then just the last thing on finances before we open it up to questions. Just a few things that as I was working and putting this together that I want to make sure we all keep in mind. First is that church finance positions, it's a volunteer role. It's easy, especially for individuals that work in the business world. It's easy to want to see things operate in a certain way or to kind of be used to things operating at a certain level. But what we have to keep in mind is in the church world, the finance people, they're volunteering their time. They're taking that extra time that could be spent with their family, that could be spent doing 1,000 other things, and they're giving that up. They're sacrificing that to keep the church finances rolling. So just I share that to simply ask, can we be patient? I don't use that as an out to give us some way to kind of keep things in the shadows because that's not my goal. But I want to make sure that we keep a realistic perspective, that we understand that we do have volunteers in these roles. Patience, and then the last thing on that as well is I do want you to know as the pastor and even as we talk as elders, our ultimate goal when it comes to our church finances is we want to be as transparent as possible. I know that's been a big question, and I think I can truthfully, at least in my year of being here, and I think I know these men well enough to say for them as well, if there's ever been something that we haven't been transparent on, it's not because we're trying to hide something, it's because we don't have the answer. We're genuinely trying to rebuild some of this with the finance team. We're trying to get back to a place where we can be as transparent as possible. So I want you to know that you have permission. If you ever have any questions on the finances, ask. We may not be able to give you a precise answer right on the spot. The answer might be, let me look into that and I'll get back with you. But I want you to know that we do truly value, as you look at the way that churches function, we're donation-based. It's all based on on people being faithful to God's command to tithe, to give. So we don't operate without you realizing that God has blessed you, and so you are called to bless others. But with you giving up your money, I know that trust has to be earned. And so part of that, we do genuinely want to work to be as transparent as possible. So we want to be able to share as much as we can. We're working to get it to a place where we can continue to share as much as we can. That's a big part of the reason why we waited this long even to have this meeting, because we wanted to have at least as much information as we shared with you tonight on this. And I know it's probably not perfect. It's not all the information that you may want to know, but know that we are working on it. We're trying to get to a place to where we can be as open as possible, to where you never have to wonder, how we're doing financially. Like we shared, God has been good. We might be in a year or two where we're operating at a little bit of a loss, but even in that loss, we're seeing God's faithfulness. We're seeing God provide. We're not at a place to where we have to be afraid of our doors closing anytime soon due to finances. We're at a place where, because of the faithfulness of God's people for so many years, we have that cushion in the bank that we don't want to take advantage of, but it gives us time to rebuild. It gives us time to maneuver. It gives us time to get the right systems in place. Because the biggest mistake we could make is to rush and put bad systems in place. We want to make sure that we get the right steps taken so that we can continue to be faithful and transparent moving forward. So what I want to do now, there is going to be more time for questions and stuff at the end, but I know there's probably questions on finance. So at this point, I want to open it up just for a few questions. If there's any questions that you have specifically related to our finances, now is the time. And we'll have time for other questions later. So Brad, this is the part. Like I said, if you want to be out of here by 7, behave yourself. Yeah. I didn't put the slide in there with the weekly giving. If you look at our weekly giving, I should have put that one in there. There was a dip. Was that what it was, September, October last year? And if you look at it, if you follow the trend line, it actually has peaked back up, and it's then held fairly stable with weekly giving. Yeah, so there was a little dip, and I think that was part of the projections of the forecast that was looking pretty scary around January. And so, honestly, giving has been good. There's a lot of other factors, and this is where Tim's more the expert. But with some of the different programs that we have with like American Heritage Girls and Trail Life, and even the camping weekend and the marriage retreat, there's different seasons where there's big chunks that are coming in and out. But throughout the summer, I believe we were positive most of the summer months, which I don't know that I've ever seen that in a church. So that was really encouraging, and that showed that even through the summer when a lot of people are vacationing, people were being faithful. I can tell you on the staff side, on the staff side, one of the things that I've been preaching to our staff is, just to be scrappy, to be smart with our finances. So if sometimes there might be a purchase you want to make, but if it's just a one-time use purchase, don't make it. Instead, purchase something that is going to give us value for years. And just trying to change the way that we think so that we as staff, the ones that have the church credit cards, to make sure that we're being good stewards and not just spending frivolously. So we've tried to tighten spend. Giving has been pretty stable. There's always room for giving to increase. But overall, I think it was, again, there's the parsonage expenses, there was my salary coming on, there was Pastor Bruce coming on, and there was the tech upgrade. There were just some big items that hit that, honestly, between the tech upgrades and the parsonage expenses, there's almost your $23,000 right there. So there's some different expenses, some being one-time expenses, some being reoccurring. But weekly giving overall has been stable. Yeah. So as of right now, it's still Tim. Yeah, and Don's kind of, again, serving in that architect role. And there's a few others that there's been conversations with, but we're still formalizing some of that. So again, oh yeah, and Keith does our accounting on Sunday mornings as well. Yeah, Carolyn. Yes, yeah, we're going to get to that. Yep. Good question. Yeah. I think my favorite part, and this just shows how immature I am, but I think my favorite part of that visit, whenever the two men came out and were checking out the facility, at one point I was out here talking with the two of them and with Mark, and one of them had to go use the restroom. And he comes back out and he's like, man, whoever does your restrooms, like that was the cleanest bathroom I've ever been in. It was, and for me, like I found so much joy in that. I'm like, man, if you only knew it was an 88-year-old that's cleaning all of this to that level. I mean, Bob is phenomenal. We are blessed to have Bob. Any questions on anything related to finances? Yeah. I understand. As a musician, it hurts my heart a little bit too. Okay, well, I don't want to jump the gun, but if there's nothing else, we'll keep on moving. All right, here we go. So the next thing I want to talk about is at the end-of-year elder meeting, part of our responsibilities as elders is to review the guiding principles, and if there's any changes that need to be made, that's the time to do it. And this last fall, when we met in August, there were a few changes. Most of them were very minor verbiage, but this one was a little more significant, and so I thought it was worth sharing tonight. And it really deals with eligibility for eldership here at Banner Church. And so as you see here, one of the goals, as we discussed it, as we talked even through this specific issue, is we really do want to maintain the integrity of the eldership while earning the trust of the congregation. Especially knowing some of the seasons that we've gone through, we feel it's very important that we are as transparent and open with you as possible. We believe it's important that we are a team of elders that operates with high integrity and that is trusted by the church. But again, we also understand that that trust has to be earned. So those are some very high priorities for us. But then at the same time, as we were looking at a few specific instances that I'm going to get into in a moment, we also want to make sure, especially in a church our size, we want to make sure that we are keeping the elder position accessible to quality candidates. So what I don't mean by that is we don't want to just lower the bar so low that it's open to anybody, because we do see biblically there are some criteria for that. But we want to make sure that we're not needlessly eliminating some quality candidates based on our own rationale. So specifically, what we addressed is in the past there was two different situations that we had operated on more on precedent. And then when we began reviewing them, we realized that they were not in the guiding principles. And so we realized we needed to address this, either confirming the precedent in our guiding principles or changing that precedent. And what that precedent was is, first of all, was if there was ever an individual who was nominated to be an elder, who was the spouse of a staff member, we would automatically eliminate that person from consideration. So if a spouse of a staff member was nominated, we would not consider them eligible for eldership. But again, that was not in our guiding principles, that was precedent. The other one is whenever it came to having multiple members of the same family serving as elder at the same time. And so the precedent had always been, if there was somebody nominated, we just knocked them out. We didn't consider them eligible. But again, that was not in the guiding principles. And so we wrestled with it, we talked through it, and at one point we were kind of leaning towards, well, do we just take the precedent and make that rule, kind of put that in our guiding principles? But the more that we talked and we prayed through it, I think each of us felt some unease with that. And so what we ended up doing is we discussed for a while, and we came up with some amendments to our guiding principles that we believe both still maintain the integrity of the eldership while opening it up. And so it's on your handouts. You'll also see it on the screens. So this is an amendment entitled Preservation of Integrity. There's 4 different parts to this that I'll read for you now. The first part of this says that Banner Church values the family. In order to protect families and preserve the integrity of the Banner eldership, no more than 2 family members within 4 degrees of separation, so grandfather and grandson, cousin and cousin, uncle and nephew, etc., may serve in overlapping terms as elders. This prevents one family holding the majority within the eldership at one time. So what this one specifically does is this makes it to where, say you do have a family member of a current elder who is nominated, where in the past they would have just been taken out of consideration. Now they can still be considered, but we're going to put a limit of no more than 2 family members on the elder board at one time. We've probably all heard of churches where you have a board that is all family. I remember my dad's first church. It was a church of 25 people. 90% of them were of the same family. So it made it difficult not to have one family controlling the board. But that can just create some challenges, and especially we never want there to be disagreements at the elder level that cause divisions within the family. But at the same time, especially in a church our size, sometimes you do have multiple members that are somehow related, that are quality candidates, and so we don't want to eliminate anybody too soon. So this puts in safeguards without eliminating too many individuals. Going to the next one. In addition, a banner elder with a familial relationship to a banner staff member will remove himself from any discussion or decision involving said staff member. Any decision made in the situation would still require majority approval. So essentially, if there's a family connection, so this would be if there's a spouse of a staff member, if there's ever a conversation or a decision to be made about that person, the elder would have to remove themselves from the conversation as we make that decision. But at the same time, so now there'd be potentially 4 individuals in the room. It would take a 3-to-1 vote for a change to be made in that situation. Number 3, if a banner member with familiar relationship to a banner staff member is nominated for eldership, the current banner elders hold the authority to approve or deny eligibility after much prayer and spirit-led dialogue. And this one can sound a little harsh potentially, but the reality is this is a practice that was already in place. One of the first steps of the elder nomination process is once all the nominees comes in, we sit down as elders and we review the eligibility and we talk through that. So this is essentially confirming it gives that opportunity to where the person could still be nominated, but there's going to be discussion, there's going to be prayer before we make that decision. And then number 4, other than the senior pastor, no banner staff member is eligible to be nominated for banner eldership. And this was just another one as we were discussing. We realized that this was something that was not in our guiding principles. So essentially you could have somebody else on staff, or you could have multiple staff members serving as elders, which obviously creates a real conflict of interest. So we just wanted to have a preventative measure. So with all 4 of these, again, the goal is we want to make sure that we don't unnecessarily eliminate quality individuals from being nominated as an elder. But at the same time, we also understand that elders, as the board that leads this church, we need to have integrity. We need to be trusted. And so this, we believe, will help us navigate that line between those 2 draws, those 2 poles. So that's where we landed. That's where we're at right now. But I know there's a lot of information to process and some things to kind of think through. But I do want to take just a moment before we move on. If you, as a congregation, have any questions about any of that, because again, we want to value trust and integrity. Any questions on any of those changes? Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It was one of those things when we realized there was just some certain things that some ways that we were operating, but then as we looked at the guiding principles, like, well, wait a second, this isn't there, so why are we doing that? So this was simply making sure we had it in writing for accountability purposes. Any other questions on any of that? Yeah, so that is a really big conversation that we have a feeling is going to be coming at some point, but we've not fully discussed yet. To not fully dive into it right now, the 2 factors that I think we have to take into consideration is, number 1, on precedent, the position of elder at Banner Church, as long as we've been in this governance structure, from what I understand, has been that it is males in this position. So that's how we have operated historically. The other factor, though, that we have to take into consideration is that we are part of a denomination that ordains women as elders. And so we find ourselves in this kind of tricky situation to where, again, this is how we've operated, but we're also part of a larger body. Now, within that larger body, there is some room for flexibility in exactly what that looks like. One of the things that I really appreciate about the United Brethren denominations, where you see a lot of denominations that divide over some of the most minute theological issues. For the United Brethren, there's the core that we hold strongly to. And with that, I mean, that includes biblical sexuality. We're one of the denominations where others were compromising in recent decades. I think it was 2 or 3 conferences ago, as a lot of this was boiling up in other denominations, we doubled down on the biblical view of sexuality. So whenever I say that we kind of have that core that we agree on and we leave flexibility, the core are things that I think most of us in this room would hold strongly to. So we're not a denomination that's slipping up theologically. But that being said, there's a lot of these other areas where there is freedom, where there's a little flexibility. There's certain stances that we can't fully take, but there is room for us to operate as we have historically. But we also have to keep in mind, though, that as a denomination, we are a denomination that ordains women, that has women senior pastors, that there are churches that have, the church I just came from, we had, I believe at the time that we left, we had one woman that was serving in the lead team. So there's factors that we have to consider. It's going to be a big conversation that I know at some point in the future we're going to have to wade through. But at this point, that's not a conversation that we have had. So at this point, we're still operating how Banner has historically, but we know that there are conversations to be had. And my prayer as a senior pastor, my hope as a senior pastor, is again, this is an issue that I've seen churches divide over. This is an issue that I've seen congregations divide over. My hope and my prayer is that whenever we get to that point, that we can stay unified. I have no doubt that there's going to be disagreement. I know that that's going to be something, but I really hope that as we tackle that conversation, as we tackle that issue, that we can stay united, that we can stay together. And we might have our preferences, we might have our opinions, but at the end of the day, I really hope that we can be a congregation that can find some sort of consensus and keep working together. Because, I mean, I have a feeling that for those of us in this room and those that were in the room this Sunday morning, we've probably had our fair share of division for a while, and we're ready to have some unity for a little bit. And so I hope to maintain that, but again, I know there are important issues that we have to discuss. Sorry, that was a very long answer to a to a question there. Yeah. Any other questions on anything with the guiding principles? All right. Let's keep on moving. So this next part, I do have to say, this is your own fault. I've had a number of individuals. There's just some different things as we've talked about. There's the big ticket items that we know that we need to do, such as the AC units and some of that. But then there's some other things in the church that are not, one of these that we're going to talk about is a necessity. 3 of the 4 that we're going to talk about are not necessarily necessities, but are things that would be nice to do. But whenever we're operating in a year where we're trying to tighten up finances, we don't necessarily want to tap into the budget. I've had a number of individuals in this church, and I'm not going to name names, but I've had a number of individuals come up to me and say, like, hey, if you just present these needs to the congregation, like, people will give. So that's what I'm doing. You brought this upon yourself. So over the last little bit, we've just been looking at a couple different options, or what are some things that we would like to do, but again, we don't necessarily in a tight budget year want to tap into the budget. So tonight what I have for you are 4 proposals, and again, one of these we probably could bump up more into the upcoming expenses because it is more of a necessity. But some of these are things that would be nice to do and would make a big impact. But again, they're tough to justify in a tight budget year. So the first one would be an interior signage update. For those of us, well, I guess for those of you that have been in this church for multiple years, I mean, even for myself being here for a year, you quickly find your way around the facility. But if you're here for the first time, and sometimes I challenge you to walk into these doors and try to look at our facility through a first-time person's eyes, our signage is terrible. We have bathroom signs, at least on the doors, which is good, so hopefully we don't have that confusion. But even if you look at our classroom, if I remember correctly, back behind here, these are 100 level classrooms. But then you go to the kids wing, and one side of the hall is still 100 level classrooms, and the other side of the hall is 200 level classrooms. And there's not a lot of sense to the way they're numbered. And I apologize if somebody in this room is the one that made the numbers for them. So between just redoing the classroom signs, getting some updated bathroom signs, but also getting some bigger signage that would help just kind of point to where the bathrooms are, to where the kids' wings are, so that as we have some of these new families that are showing up, they're not asking, well, where's the nursery, or where's the kids' ministry, or where are the bathrooms? And even for the PTC kids here on Thursdays, it helps them kind of find where they're going. So that's something we know we need to upgrade. It's not a necessity, but it would make a big difference. I've done a little bit of exploration, and it looks like that would cost roughly $828. So that's something that's not super scary, but again, it's an expense that we don't want to take out of the budget if we don't have to. The second one, proposal number 2. This one, some of you maybe have noticed, some of you have not. We have all of these awesome TVs throughout our facility that have not been turned on in I don't know how long. And the reason for that, we've done some investigating. At one point, we thought maybe it was the adapters behind the TVs that the wires plug into, and we swapped those out, and that didn't change anything. What we've ultimately found is there's a piece of equipment that you see on the screen, but that's up in the tech booth that just finally gave out on us and died. And what that does is all of these TVs, this piece of equipment would allow us to send the countdown. It would allow us to send the message slides, the music slides, all that kind of stuff, and ultimately someday even the video feed out into the lobby. But until we replace this piece, we have a bunch of very nice TVs mounted on our walls that do absolutely nothing for us. So again, it's one of those we're functioning without, but it would be nice to get them back up and running, and that's going to be a cost of just under $1,500. Yes. It doesn't have to be new, but if you start looking refurbished, and I'm not above that, and I've done some looking, these pieces of equipment, there's not a big market for them refurbished. Because similar to us, a lot of times it gets installed and it stays there until it dies and then it gets replaced. I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not above exploring that option. As long as it's in good condition, I'm not opposed to that one bit. I know recently an individual in the congregation approached me, and she works with, I believe it was a college who just shut down their video department, and they had this massive list of video equipment. So she asked, is there anything you need? And so I sent her this piece, and they unfortunately didn't have it. They had some wonderful cameras that were way out of our price range. But this piece. But if you want to check into that, I can get you the model number and all that stuff. That'd be awesome. Yeah, will do. Thank you, Mark. Number 3 would be upgrading our live stream cameras. So this would be replacing the one in the back and then getting a second camera so we can have more of a close-up and then a wide shot just to enhance our live stream. One of the things that I have learned about this church is that this is a church that likes to camp. So if you've ever gone camping and tried to watch our live stream, it's not terrible, but it's also not great. There's room for improvement, but again, that's one of those things, even as a pastor, I struggle a little bit with. I think there is value. I mean, a lot of the research out there shows, and what a lot of church leadership experts or church experts say, is that the live stream has become essentially the new church lobby. For a lot of people, as they're checking out a church, before stepping in through our doors, they're checking out our live stream. And so it's important that we maintain at least a certain level of quality. But then at the same time, I know that we also have a pretty significant number of homebound that this is their way that they stay engaged. And so I'm trying to find that balance of I don't want to invest too much into something, because ultimately I believe it's so important that if possible that you're in the room. I mean, we've learned since coming out of COVID, this fellowship, this community is vital. And so I want to encourage that, but at the same time, I want to honor our homebound. I want to honor those that aren't able to join us in person. So looking into it, these are cameras. These are ones that before I left college, we had upgraded to these, and they were phenomenal. They're multi-purpose, meaning that you could grab them off the wall and use it just like you would a camera like you might have in your house to do other video work. So they're multi-purpose. They have a lot of functionality, but they're also top-notch and have great clarity. So for the 2 cameras, the one package is about $1,200. The other is, well, I guess they're both about $1,200. So it comes out to, again, just under $2,500. So that's not a necessity, but it's an upgrade that would be nice if the funding was there. And then the last one, which this one is more of a necessity, right, Brad? I'll let Bill talk about.
First off, as a church, so for me, it's the best way for the body. And so Brad has been doing that for, out there for a few months, probably talking to different places and looking at different machines. And actually, this is a real-time pick. It's the real pick that he's found. And this said Bill, this will all last us. It's a good machine, but it's $5,500.
Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my turn till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my turn till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you. Oh, what a day when you called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. I need a rescue, my sin is heavy, the chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, now your love is the air I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you
I'm not
We're
opposed to
gonna be
that at all.
opening the floor.
Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, who is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace
That's a great thought. No, yeah.
while I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me.
That's a good.
Yes, he died.
You what? That's good.
Sets free, always free.
That'd be great. Yeah. Well, we'll open it up to questions again here in just a second, but just to tidy up this section specifically, how we're going to approach these current ones, and I'm all for adding to. If you ever have suggestions, please bring them to us. We want to be an open group. But you probably saw in the back, maybe you already grabbed one. We have some proposal forms that are back there that give you a chance. Yeah, Jolene's got it. That give you a chance if you want to do a designated donation. You can mark that so we know specifically what one you're giving towards. As specific items or proposals are funded, we'll make those purchases. So we're not going to jump the gun. We will need to hit complete funding before we do that, except for the mower. That one's happening. So please do that if possible. Also, it's a great time of year, getting ready to go into year-end giving. So what we're asking on the last slide there is, take time to pray about it. Take it home with you. You don't need to make any decisions tonight. But if you do feel led to be generous to give towards this, I would encourage you to fill out the form, bring it back into the office with your check, and we'll keep you posted as those things get funded. And again, I've had a lot of people say and tell me how generous this church is, and I've seen it for myself. But if we end up fully funding all of these, then any extra funds would just kind of go into some of these facility upgrades that are coming up, or towards getting some handicap bathroom doors set up, which would be phenomenal. Any questions on the proposals before we move to the very last thing, which should be fairly quick? Does anybody have an update on the Lions? Oh, yeah, let's get to that before we get to the Lions. Oh, on? It's over? Sorry. Sorry, Lions fans, for distracting you from the whole game. I thought we could get home for the fourth quarter. But yes, so what was the question? Yeah. Yeah, it's a valuable tool that is worth investing in. And to speak to some of the stuff that's happened in the last year, we did, when was this? It was sometime over the summer. There was a piece of equipment that we did buy that was about $1,200, and we got installed up there. That really it took. I'm trying to think how to explain as simply as possible, but basically it was a mess of adapters up there trying to make our live stream work, and we got a piece of equipment that's professional grade that tied it all together, and so that stabilized a lot of the issues we were having. So we're really, the piece that we have up there now, it can scale as we grow. So right now, where we have one camera running into it, we have the equipment to where we could add up to, I think, 7 more cameras, which I don't plan on doing that because you don't need to see that much of my face. But it's a piece of equipment that we can grow with, and it gives us flexibility to do a lot of nice things. So that's where, again, the camera quality is one that needs to get upgraded. The audio quality, that gets a little trickier. That starts requiring some professional help to get that much better, but we're working on making improvements. So the camera quality, that's an easy one that we can pretty simply tackle. But we're set up though to where we can scale well as we have people that are trained and know how to run it. But yeah, that's a great question. Yes, Carolyn.
I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me
I think with
now.
the live stream too, we have to understand there are a lot of components that make this happen. Understanding the struggles that we have. And this is not just new to us, it's new for a lot of churches. It's over everybody's trying to figure this out.
Lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh yes, I will. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now. In the waiting, the same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working
It definitely can, and I think we should. Yeah. We got to figure out how to do that well. Yeah, honestly, email is probably because this is one of those things to where I like it in this setting. I struggle with this is just the way I'm wired, it's personal preference. But I always struggle whenever you go to a Sunday morning church service and the pastor just sits there talking about, here's all the finances that we need, give us your money. I never want to be that pastor, but again, there are needs that need to be communicated. So yeah, probably email might be the best route to do that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's because of the volume, not my voice. I'm kidding. Well, so here's the challenge that I'll put out there, and this is a good challenge. There's some of the tech pieces that need to be upgraded, and there's always going to be things to improve. I mean, one of the churches that I worked at, they just built this new facility. They were running three cameras that were each, if I remember correctly, between the lenses and the camera, $100,000 a piece. Plus, I don't even know how many thousands of dollars back in the booth. And they still had issues. And the problem is getting the people to run it. So the challenge that I'll put out there is we can do better, but it's going to take people stepping up to be trained. It's going to take people that are willing to give the time to be here for worship practices on Wednesday nights to get things dialed in, and then to show up on Sunday morning and make sure it runs smoothly. Because even some of the Sundays, again, our audio, because of our system, it's never going to be perfect because we don't have $100,000 to put into all the equipment that some churches have. But the Sundays, if you listen, there's some Sundays that are going to be better than others, and those are the Sundays where we have somebody on sound who's taken the time to not just mix the room, but then put the headphones on and listen in and dial in the mix. And we don't have that. And there's been Sundays where Kennedy's up leading worship and I'm running sound over here on an iPad. So I put that out there not as a complaint, but as we can do better. But that's going to take, beyond finances, that's going to take people stepping up and willing to serve. And I think we can do it. It just takes it takes people stepping up. And sometimes it's easier to give our money than it is to give our time and our energy. So that's the challenge that I put out there. We can do better. We're getting the pieces of equipment that enable us to do better. Even the soundboard that we upgraded sets us up to do better with our live stream audio. It just takes somebody dedicated to running it. If we had the people, I could probably within 2 or 3 weeks have us set up pretty good up there to have somebody dedicated running it well. We need the people.
In the darkest day remains Jesus. This we know, we will see the enemy run. This we know, we will see the victory come. We hold on to every promise you ever made. Jesus, you are unfailing. Our guide through the wilderness,
Carolyn.
and our joy in the heaviness. Our way when it seems there is no way.
It's definitely, I mean, like I said before, I remember coming through COVID, there were so many, there's one guy, I'm a podcast junkie, and it's one of the big church leadership guys, and like all through COVID, he was like, virtual church, online church, that's the new norm. Everybody's doing it. You got to do it. Invest the funds, invest the funds. And by earlier this year, he was already walking that back a little bit because I think he just realized, as so many of us did, of being in the room, there is something about it. But again, at the same time, just because that's the priority doesn't mean you can neglect the other. So it's that balance to where, again, the ultimate goal is we want to invite people into a life-giving community of being here in person. But at the same time, realize there are moments where your kid is sick and so you're at home, or you're on vacation, or you're in Florida, or even, again, the homebound. So we want to put our best foot forward and provide as good of a live stream as we can while also being good stewards of our resources. So that's the balance that we're walking. And again, with the upgrades we've already made, in my opinion, and I'm not the best tech guy, but I work with this a little bit, if we were to replace this camera and get even one other camera angle, if you've ever been watching football, once again, sorry Lions fans, I made you miss your game, but where they ever show like the video feed from inside the video truck where there's the guy sitting there with all the video monitors and all that, the piece of equipment that we have now essentially enables us to do a smaller scale of that. So we're set up and there's already a TV up there that we can tap into, but if we had the person to run it that was trained, we could have somebody sitting up in the tech booth looking at this TV that has all the camera feeds, that's switching between them, while also running sound specifically for the live stream from an iPad. So we're set up for it. We just need somebody to run it. So there's steps that we're taking, but again, we're at the point with our live stream where really it just takes trained individuals that are willing to give the time to do it. So we're close. We're close. There's hope. And really financially is not a ton. So we're not far away. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That. Yeah.
Yes, we trust you.
Yeah.
Jesus, we trust
Yes.
your way higher than our own. Yes, we trust you. In all things we trust for your ways higher than our own. Forever we trust. We trust your way higher than our
Yeah. 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 And that's where, Mark, if you do want to get us that contact even this week, this is why we like Mark. He doesn't mess around. Yep. Carolyn. Yep, absolutely. That's a good point. Anything else on that before we move on? All right. The last section that I've got before we open it up for any last questions, and this one, there's not a lot of information yet, but this is just as we look to the future. Um, over the next few years, what I envision for us as elders, and we've already started these conversations, it feels like looking over the last couple of years, and even over the last, I'd say 2.5 years, the elders, the main priority has been how do we sort of steady the ship. Obviously, we've gone through some rough waters. How do we bring stability back? How do we heal? How do we become unified again? And while there's probably, I have no doubt, still some work that we need to do on that front, it does feel like we've reached a point where we're coming together as a congregation. And I can honestly say, coming in as a first-time pastor, I mean, I had one of my mentors at my last church, he was one of our elders there, that pulled me aside while I was in the interview process and was trying to basically tell me, like, just make sure you know what you're getting into, and telling me all the horror stories about how rough this is going to be. I've been so amazed to find how healthy this church is and how unified this body is. And again, is it perfect? No, because we're human. But seeing how together this church has just come over the last, even before I got here and since I got here, it's been such a blessing. So now as elders, as we look to, okay, well, where are we going now? It really is that question that you see there of who is God calling Banner Church to be now? As we've gone through some of that, as we've drawn together as a church, now it's this season of still kind of waiting, which I'm sure we're all sick of hearing, but really just asking God, who are you calling us to be? Where are you leading us? So as elders, we're going to be visiting the idea of mission and vision. So looking at our mission statement, our vision statement, and really just trying to figure out who are we now? Looking at everything we've gone through, I truly believe that God used that season to help shape us, to maybe break us of some things that we need to be broken of, but also to teach us, to mold us. And so now we're looking at this body, and I'm seeing so many things that I'm excited about, but it's that question of, God, who are you calling us to be? So just so you know, to be as transparent as possible, those are the conversations that we're going to be having over the next year or two as elders. So what I want to invite you to as a congregation is to be praying with us. Because truly, I mean, I don't just get up here on Sunday mornings and preach and say these words because I know it's what I should say. I truly want us to be a spirit-led church. I want us to be a church that doesn't just try to do what every other church is doing, but instead I want to say, God, who are you calling us to be? And let's be faithful to that. Because I can tell you, I mean, you guys have gotten to know me for a year already. If we're going to try to be a church that's built on my leadership strength, we're going to struggle. But if we're a church that says, God, where are you leading us? And if we prayerfully stay in step with that, then we have hope for a bright future. So that's what I want us to be. And so that requires a church that continues to pray. That requires a church that is open to the Spirit's leading and prompting, that doesn't rely on any of the strengths of us up here in front of you now, but that truly fully relies on God. So be praying with us. And honestly, if there's even moments where you feel the Spirit is prompting you or giving you some insight as to who we are as a church, share with us. I want this to be an open conversation. I don't plan on necessarily doing congregational meetings every month, but I want you to know that as a congregation, we value your input. I mean, we truly do believe that each one of us together make up the body. And so we need your input. We want to work together on this. So again, I can't give you a 5-year plan tonight. I can't give you a 10-year plan tonight. But what I can say is that we're entering into a season of just asking, God, who are you calling us to be? And so we're inviting you to walk with us through this, to pray with us through this. And I'm excited to see what God has in store. So that's all I have on my notes. Yes, Megan.
We are a sea of voices. We are an ocean of your praise. We're gathered under
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't know if right now if I can tell you exactly what that process is going to look like because we haven't gotten that far. I don't envision that being a process where we are just dictators and we say, this is what it is, deal with it. So I think there probably will be some communication involved in that. But again, the thing that we have to keep in mind is looking at who we are as a denomination. So there's certain things, we have some freedom, we have some flexibility, but I mean, I can say as a young pastor, I'm not yet ready to go against the denomination and say, well, this might be what you tell us to do, but we're going to do our own thing. But there's some things that, again, there's some room within that, but that's going to be a big conversation at some point for sure.
At the cross where sin was slain, we're gathered under one name, where every chain is broken and every sorrow swept away. Gathered under one name, oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing the glories of our Lord God Almighty.
Yeah, no, that's a, as a youth pastor or as a former youth pastor, that's a question that I definitely care strongly about. That's one. Here's kind of where my focus is at. As I look at where we're at as a church right now and seeing the many young families that we've been blessed with in the field, and look at Carolyn in the nursery, and I mean, you guys are booming over there, and you look at the Sunday morning kids ministry that's taking place. What I'm looking at right now is we have a kids ministry that is loaded, and I honestly, as I look at it, and hear me out in the whole statement that I'm about to make, as partial would sound a little bad, but as I look at the kids ministry, that's the youth ministry of our future. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there's been some different situations that have taken place over the last couple of years in our youth ministry that's resulted in it, we'll just say shrinking, to a pretty small group right now. You know, we still have a number of students in our church that are engaged in another youth ministry that are still being ministered to. But if you look at the kids that are active in Banner Youth, that number has gotten significantly smaller a few years ago. And so we're in a rebuilding process. And so as a former youth pastor, I'm not willing to just neglect the teams that we have. We still have to do work there. But at the same time, if we're looking towards the future, while not neglecting the current students, we need to be looking at what's coming up and build that core, because that's going to be the core that turns our youth ministry around. It's going to take time. So we're looking at the kids ministry and just evaluating things and seeing if we need to do anything there. As we build that core, then we'll be looking more at the youth ministry probably in a year or two to see what do we need to do there. In the meantime, what we've done is this year we shifted things a little bit with the youth ministry. Ryan and MJ are still kind of taking the administrative lead with our youth ministry to make sure it's functioning. Alicia and I, we've stepped in a little bit, and Alicia's been good at holding me back because as a former youth pastor, again, it takes a lot of self-control not to jump in and want to take it over. But we've opened up the parsonage every other week, and then the Mi'dmas are hosting on the other weeks. And what we're trying to do is create more of a relational atmosphere for the current students that we have to make sure that they stay connected, to make sure that they stay engaged, to make sure we're still serving them well as we look at that core that's coming up. So it's not perfect right now. I wish that I could say that there was some silver bullet that if we took the step, all of a sudden our youth ministry would be back. But there's a lot of complicated factors as we look at the youth ministry right now. So all that to say, our focus is looking at the kids ministry to see if we need to do anything there to help beef that up. And as we raise that core, we're going to try to snowball and build with that group that we see coming up as we then rebuild and revitalize our youth ministry. But in the meantime, we're still doing what we can with the resources we have to serve our teams as best as possible.
Creation calls all to the Savior. We are alive for your praise in earth and sky.
That's definitely part of it. And again, that's where MJ's kind of coordinating that, and I'm doing my best to keep boundaries so I don't overstep my boundaries. So part of it, yeah, is volunteer help. And again, that's where it's been fun to have them in our home and have MJ hosting in their home. Part of it is we know at some point it's probably going to take some funding, some finances to really take it where it needs to go. But But we're just, as you saw the financial update, we're not quite at a point where we're ready to make a staffing adjustment. But those are things that we're evaluating to see what steps do we need to take. Let's have a conversation about that. If that's something that you're wanting to get involved in, let's have a conversation about that. I would love to. I mean, for one, I so appreciate that you stepped in this fall to keep the youth Sunday school class going. That has been huge, especially because you stepped in at the last minute that I came to you in that. So I really appreciate that. But yeah, let's talk more and see what I can look like. I think it's been one of those things that in different conversations, I wouldn't even say it's been talked about, but it's popped up to where it's like, yes, we need to address that at some point, but there's been bigger issues that we've had to get to before getting to that one. So there's not been conversations about it, but it's popped up to where we've noticed, okay, we're going to have to talk about this. When you say corporate, oh, you mean here at the church since Huntington. Oh, it's been since the beginning, from what I understand. We've historically been a denomination that has gone that route.
You were the word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ.
Yeah, I want to be hesitant of saying, because again, we have not talked about it. So I don't want to say anything tonight to commit to. I would say, yeah,
What a beautiful
yes.
name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus.
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't want heaven without us.
Yeah.
So Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater.
What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is.
Mennonite and German Reformed, I believe.
What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. Death could not hold you. Failed all before you. You silenced the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring. The praise of your glory. For you are raised to life again. You have no rival. You have no equal. Now and forever, God, you reign. Yours is the kingdom. Yours is the glory.
Well,
Yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus.
and I think maybe what you're getting at as well, though, is where now, again, there are some women that are in like official roles, in the women's ministry or children's ministry, but you're seeing less where in the past you would have almost, there was the board, but even biblically you see the elder and deacon roles, and right now the deacon level, we have a team we call the deacons, but it's more of a benevolence team. But you see that level that isn't really functioning right now. And is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Anything else? I know we've covered a lot of ground tonight. Yeah, Rick.
All right, show of hands on who wants to help with that. You guys all want to sign up?
There we go.
Okay, talk to me.
Yeah. Perfect. So here, just out of curiosity, how many people realized it was off-centered before we put the wood panels up? Yeah, before. Okay. That's something that's made me laugh so much, is how many people are like, did you guys move the cross? It's like, no. That is where it has always been. Yeah, there has been a lot of conversation. I think it's really finding the manpower and the right time to do it. There's some logistical things that we just got to figure out the right way to still anchor it and move it, because I've been told that thing weighs like 700 pounds. Is that what it is? Something like that? It's heavy. Yeah, yes, well, yeah.
There is a steel beam in the center, so I mean that's why they moved it off originally. Not thinking anybody was on this, I guess I wasn't part of that, but still I think I would address the steel beam. There's space to have to do that, but it's just a little more.
All I'm saying, and my wife will vouch for this, you don't want me to be the one trying to move it and center it, because I might find a way to do it. I can't guarantee it's not going to crush somebody someday. We do have a lift now. Yes, that is a thing. Yeah, that was a blessing. Oh, man. Oh, man, I don't know. Yeah, if you sit at the right angle, it's not as obvious. Yeah. Yes, it is. I can tell you, whenever Jared and I were mounting the panels, we tried moving these middle two around, like, as they're away. Yeah. That was brilliant, whoever designed that, for sure. That's a great winter project. Let's make it happen. Yeah, I think we have the person that's going to be heading it up, right? All right. Well, if there is nothing else, I don't want to go too late here. I know we have a dog in the kennel at home that's ready to get out. But yeah, just moving ahead though. I don't want to. If there are any more questions, I don't want to squash that. But please know that my heart, and I think I can speak for all of us as elders, as we've had conversations about this. Moving forward, we truly do want to be as open and honest and transparent. If there's ever a time where there's something we can't tell you, again, it's probably not because we don't want to or we're trying to hide something. It's probably because we're still trying to find the answer. It's going to take some time, but please know if you ever have questions about anything, finances or what's going on at the church, we want to be able to share as much as we can because we know that a big part of leadership is that trust. And I know that we've got to earn that trust. And I want to do everything that we can to do that. So if there's ever anything, my door is open. I try to answer my phone. My service in the office isn't always great, so call the church and Linda will patch you in. And if you come on the right days, you can even hang out with the dog. He's in the office sometimes too. But yeah, so thank you so much though for taking the time tonight. I really appreciate it. And what I really, even coming in tonight, what I really hope this time for us tonight and as we look ahead, clearly there's still conversations to be had. There's still things to figure out. But I also don't want us to lose sight of look at what God has already done. I mean, look at how far this church has come. I mean, I know there was so much work that was done. So for those of you that got to see the work in that year before I got here, which I know it wasn't the most enjoyable season, but the healing that took place in that, I mean, and the healing that Alicia and I have got to witness, there is something special about being in church. There's something special about this family. And even since coming here, and I mean, I came here from a church that I dearly love, that I'm always going to love, that it's kind of been my home church over at Colwood. And that was a church that I always, as I reflected on it and as I participated there, I always talked about how much of a family it was and how spiritually grounded it was. And since coming to Banner, it's shown me that there's even another level. That there's just something special about this body. And part of that may be just what we've walked through together. It might be the way that, again, instead of being broken, to see a congregation go what you guys have gone through, what we've gone through together, and to come out the other side humble but hungry. It's so encouraging. I'm still learning and growing as a pastor, and I'm sure I'm going to do some dumb stuff, but I'm doing my best. But more than anything, I just want to be faithful to what God is calling us to do. And so as a church, if we keep that posture, if we continue to be a church that prays, if we continue to be a church that just says, God, who are you calling us to be? And whenever he gives us that next step, we take it. I have no doubt that there's a bright future. We're going to have some things to tackle. There's going to be some difficult moments, but I'm honestly excited to see what God has in store for us at Banner Church. So let's pray, and then we can hang around and talk a little bit, but I want to free you guys up to go home and not watch the Lions game. Sorry. Well, let's pray. Dear Father, I thank you for this time that we've had tonight. God, I thank you for the conversations. God, I thank you for the humility. God, you're up to something good here. You're up to something special in this congregation. I know there's still lots of hurts. I know there's still wounds and scars from the season that we've walked through. But God, I thank you that this is a church that you didn't let fall apart in the midst of all of that. Father, I thank you just for the faithfulness of the elders and the leaders and even the many within the congregation, that in the midst of all the challenges, they held firm, that they kept pursuing you. Father, I pray that as we look into the future, and while we know, yes, there are still challenges, there's still obstacles, there's still going to be different things that pop up in different ways that the devil tries to divide us. But God, I pray that you would keep us unified. Father, I pray that rather than our eyes being focused on the things that divide us, on the things that are different about each other, God, I pray that you would keep our eyes solely on you and where you are calling us to go. So, Father, as we look to the future, more than anything, God, we just acknowledge this is your church. That we are powerless to do anything on our own, that we don't want to do anything on our own, but instead, God, we want to see you moving. We want to see you leading and guiding. So may we remain humble. May we remain hungry as we look to the future. In your name, amen. Thank you for taking the time tonight. We'll see you on Sunday.